So today we are going to do a brand new series called the Emotional Index. And basically this is something that I've decided to do pretty much every single month for the rest of the season. And basically this is also kind of a series is going to replace the power rankings that I used to do. And for those of you wondering why I don't do power rankings anymore, I think power rankings are dumb. And especially the way that when you look at the weekly power rankings that the league basically release on their website, yeah, it's just absolutely crazy with the way how they put each team. And it feels like every single week each of these team in terms of where they place in the power rankings are really based on whether or not if they win or lose in the weekend's action. I mean, if you win a game, sometimes you can go up like 6 spots in the power rankings, but if you lose a game, then you go down 6 spots in the power rankings. And it doesn't matter if you're playing at home or on the road, or you're facing a good team or you're facing a bad team. If you don't get a win, you are not going to rise in the power rankings, and most likely you're going to really fall down in the power rankings. And I just feel like this year, in terms of how they do the power rankings, it's even more ridiculous than I've seen in the past that they have done. And in the past, I also thought that it was kind of ridiculous how they put each of these team in the power rankings. And there's clearly some bias that it seems like the so-called MLS expert decided to do their power rankings. So yeah, that's why I kind of decided to not do it, because I don't want to end up to be like those people where, again, I don't think power rankings are really worth anything other than bragging rights, and that at the end of the day, what really matters is the standings right now in MLS, because that's basically what determine whether or not you're going to make the playoffs at the end of the regular season, and not the power rankings. But in terms of this emotional index, what this is basically about is that it's pretty much just me putting every 27 teams and taking a look at how they feel in terms of things has gone on for these past couple weeks, and also how each fan base are feeling about their team and how they've been doing in the past couple weeks and also throughout the season. Now, in terms of this emotional index in this first ever one, I am actually going to eliminate the bottom tier, and this is why I put like a big X here in the bottom tier, because this bottom tier is basically the panic tier, where it's insert the dog sitting down saying that this is fine while fire is around him kind of meme / panic mode, because we're only 3 weeks into the season, and pretty much every single team have played 3 games, with some that have only played 2 games this season, and you just simply cannot put them in this tier, and just you simply cannot feel like your team is in a situation where you're really going to have to panic after 3 games, because we're still less than 10% of the season. Like, that's going to be clearly an overreaction if you said that your team is clearly in a panic mode. Although I will say that there are some teams that I'll mention here as I put them in this emotional index that is pretty close in terms of getting to this point. And I think next time when I do the emotional index, which will be right around the beginning of June and the beginning of this kind of mini international break that MLS is going to be in, then yeah, I will open this category back, and I will put some team that is definitely in a stage where I wouldn't blame that they're definitely in panic mode heading into that part of the season. But we start off with Atlanta United, and by the way, I'm not going to go in order in terms of putting each of these team in this emotional index, just like what I did previously with the expectation index and also the hot seat index. But I'll start with Atlanta, since that's always the team I start when I put them on an index, and I'll say they're going to be right around here. So I think for Atlanta, they pretty much sums up what this category is, where it's kind of been a meh kind of start to the season, where things could be better for them, but it could have also been a lot worse with the way that things have gone so far for their team. I mean, it's kind of been an up and down start to the season for Atlanta United. I mean, if you even include CCL into me talk about them in the emotional index, they had some good moments in CCL, beating Alajuelense in both of the legs, and then also in MLS play, they were able to win 3-1 against the Chicago Fire, and also got a 0-0 draw against Orlando City. But there's also been the bad part of this season, which is they of course lost 3-0 against the Union in the first leg of CCL, which pretty much is a deficit that it's too much for them to overcome. And then, of course, last week, it was a very strange decision that Gabriel Heinze decided to still think that he had a chance in that second leg against the Union and kind of rest some of his guys. And because of that, they, of course, kind of had no chance against New England, and they lost that one. 1-2. So, yeah, for Atlanta, I think it's been kind of a mess start for them. Although, I will say that, this is kind of thing I expect with this Atlanta team, where they're probably not going to be a team that is going to be above the playoff line, or maybe gonna be right on the bubble in the beginning of the season. But once things start to get going for them, and once a lot of these players has the chemistry, and also Gabriel Heinze can actually get this team going, and also once Joseph Martinez, of course, are started banging goals again. I know there are also some fans that are kind of concerned that Joseph Martinez is struggling early in the season, but again, it's we've seen this before, where players, when they come back from a torn ACL, it's going to take a while for them to get things going, and I'm not going to also be in a panic stage where Joseph Martinez is not producing goal, probably until maybe in the middle of the season, where if he continue to not produce goal as we get to the middle of the season, then there's definitely going to be some rights that Atlanta fans are going to be very concerned of the fact that Joseph Martinez has kind of looked not the same as the player that he was before he suffered that torn ACL last season. But now moving on into DC United. And for DC, they're kind of also around the same category, although I'll put them a little bit lower. Where, for DC, it hasn't been the best start for them. I mean, besides that 2-1 win against NYCFC, their next two game hasn't been very well. I mean, they took a boring 1-0 loss against New England, and then they, of course, got absolutely destroyed by the Quakes during this weekend's action. Although I'll give Hernan Losada a pass in terms of this poor start that they have, because when you look at the injury list that DC United currently have, it's probably one of the longest injury lists right now in the league. And when you have that many player that is injured, and especially this is a team that is not one of the team that has a lot of depth to replace some of those star players that currently is on the IR list, it's not a big surprise that DC is struggling in this early part of the season. And it's also not surprised that, I when I look at what Hernan Losada has done with this team, I definitely love some of the tactics and some of the system he's trying to implement this team, but it's clear that there's still not enough players that can potentially fit into a system, or at least these players that have the quality to fit into the system that Losada is going to implement. And once, if he is going to get some of these injured player back in the starting 11, or maybe in the summer they might add a couple of signings to pretty much fit in this Losada system, I think DC could get themselves going. But as of now, it hasn't been the best start for this team because of injury. But one team that it's been feeling kind of right at this tier of what a dream start to this season, and that, of course, is New England. I mean, they are at the top of the Eastern Conference right now. Now, I will say that the Revs haven't really been playing kind of some of the soccers where you think that they are looking like an unbeatable team in the Eastern Conference. I mean, in that first game against the Fire, they did show some vulnerability in their defense, but they did kind of clean things up for their next two games. Although you also look on the attacking end, where besides they did score those 2 goals against Chicago to get a draw, their attack hasn't really been clicking in so far here in the early part of the season. But at the same time, when you look at the standings and where they're at the top of the Eastern Conference and currently have 7 points, I don't think New England fans are going to be very concerned about the fact that they haven't really hit their stride yet, which I think that's also what's impressive about New England. Like, the fact that they are at the top of the Eastern Conference and they still haven't hit their stride. Like, once this team does hit their stride and can be a team that everybody could think this Revs team could be heading into the season, this could be a team that could maybe even finish at the top of the Eastern Conference. And I might even have to reconsider what I did in my prediction, where I maybe underestimated that the Revs might actually be a team that could be a serious contender coming out of the Eastern Conference. But now moving on to Sporting KC. And for Sporting KC, it's kind of right around here. And of course, they would have been right here if they would have got a draw or even a win against RSL. But it's been kind of a meh start for Sporting KC. I mean, besides that good win that they had against the Red Bulls and a come from behind win against the Red Bulls on the road. You know, they did drew 1-1 against Orlando City, and then they lost 3-1 in that game against RSL, where, you know, when I look at that game, they kind of started out pretty well, but then, yeah, the big issue that I thought the Sporting KC team probably going to have this season is the defense. I mean, the defense basically completely fell apart in that game against RSL, and that's going to be something that Peter Vermeer's team needs to figure out heading into this season, and especially something they got to address in the summer transfer window, because, as I said before, I'm shocked the fact that they did not do anything to address the defense, where, you know, yes, when you look at last season and in terms of stats-wise, they weren't really conceding as much goals as you would think that it's a team with bad defense, but you also got to consider they had Tim Melia last season, and there's been times where Tim Melia was really playing lights out to really make some big save to really kind of overshadow of the fact that this defense was not very good, and now without Tim Miller in this team, and, you know, unfortunately they had to start their backup goalkeeper Pushkin, which I don't think he's ready yet with the way that he's been playing in these first couple of games. It's pretty much just shows why this defense is definitely showing why it probably was not as good as we all thought last season, and it's also kind of proved my point where, yeah, clearly this is a team that you know, that's with how their defense have played, especially heading into the playoffs, and the fact that they did not address it this offseason, I definitely have a lot of concern with it, and with the way that they've been playing right now, I think there's definitely, once again, that similar concern, and the fact that they got to do something to address that defense have not looked good so far this season. But now moving on to Inter Miami, and for Inter Miami, I'll say they're going to be right here. So I think Miami fans are pretty happy in terms of the start that this team has. I mean, despite the fact that they did take that opening day loss against the Galaxy, things have definitely looked well for this team, able to pick up 4 points against the Union and also against Nashville. And consider how, you know, when you also look at the start of the season, it's definitely not an easy start to the season, especially going on the road against the Union and also going on the road against Nashville, two places where I thought it was automatic loss for Miami. Able to get 4 points out of that, and maybe I, of course, have underestimated how Phil Neville has done with this team. Now, that being said, we'll see whether or not if they, of course, can continue. And, you know, so far, when you look at this team, it's pretty clear that some of these guys that kind of underachieved last season, like Gonzalo Higuain and Blaise Matuidi, has really stepped up heading into the season and are kind of having a comeback year heading into the second year. But we shall see whether or not if that is going to continue, and whether or not if Inter Miami continued to be off to a decent start that they had so far this season. Now, moving on to Austin FC, and there is no doubt Austin FC is going to be right here, where, I mean, you couldn't ask for anything better if you're an Austin FC fan, where, you know, this first free game of the season, you know, with the way that they're now sitting there near the top part of the Western Conference and have six points, and oh, by the way, they all did this while playing all their game on the road. It's definitely very, very impressive, and it's not like some of the road games that they've been playing on the road are places that is easy to get all 3 points. I mean, yes, they did lose in that opening weekend again against LAFC, but obviously there's no shame of not getting any points out of that, because Bank of California Stadium is a very tough place to get points out of. But the fact that they can go to Colorado, a place that is also very hard to get points because of the altitude, and then go into Allianz Field, another place that is almost impossible to get anything out of it, and also playing some very fun and attractive soccer on the way, where I really think with the way that they've been playing right now, they definitely don't look like an expansion team, and that is kind of shocking thing to say when I see an expansion team in their first free game, because usually in the first free game when I see an expansion team come, I can understand why things haven't gone well and they still look disjointed, but that doesn't seem like that's the case. It seems like they clearly have an identity heading into this season, and, you know, if they can, of course, keep this up, this could really be a team that I think could be the eighth MLS team to make it to the playoffs in their expansion year. And yeah, let's see if Austin FC can continue to keep up this promising, or I wouldn't say a promising, but more like a dream start that they have so far this season. Now moving on to Nashville SC. I'm going to say Nashville is going to be right here. So they're kind of the first team where I'm putting right in that category where, there's definitely going to be some concern and things are kind of looking dire after the poor start of the season. And it's not the fact that, they're concerned because of the fact that they have lost game. In fact, they actually have not lost a single game this season. But at the same time, they also haven't won a single game this season, as they, I think, are the only team to draw their first 3 games so far in this season. And the fact that all 3 of those draw actually came at home. And for Nashville, when you also look at their schedule with the way that they have a very heavy home schedule to start the season, and they're going to be on the road a lot in the back half of the season, this is definitely going to be concerning, the fact that they are dropping points at home. And especially, it feels like every single game they have always got off to a poor start to the season, which last season that was unimaginable under Gary Smith. Yeah, that's something that is definitely a bit of a concern. And I think maybe the thing that might not be a concern is the fact that the attack looks like it has got things going, but also there is still that concern about the defense, where this season, again, as I said, this is kind of a weird season for Nashville, where it's kind of backwards in terms of the way that they have looked in the beginning of the season. Like last season, they have problems in terms of scoring, but they have a solid defensive foundation. This season, it's the opposite. They look like paper thin at the back, but going forward, they look like a team that can really be a force going for in front of goal. So yeah, despite that, since they haven't got a win this season and have got 3 straight draw and have already dropped some crucial points at home, and knowing the fact that this is also a team that doesn't usually do well on the road, there's definitely some concern right now of how things have got to the start for this Nashville team. Now, moving on to NYCFC. I think for NYCFC, they're going to be right next to where Inter Miami is, where, I know after that start to their season where they lost 2-1 against DC United, I'm pretty sure a lot of NYCFC fans were feeling like they're right here where, yeah, things are definitely not looking good, and it looks like it's going to be a long season. But ever since that, they, of course, took down FC Cincinnati 5-0, and they're also another team that is able to go to Philly and get a huge victory there. And it just seems like, this NYCFC team, despite the fact that I talk about the problems that they have with lack of depth on the attacking end, he seems to be doing fine so far, and also scoring goals too in these first couple of games. And also their defense have been pretty stable, even though they did give up 2 goals in that opening weekend. They didn't really give up a lot of chances for DC United. And keep in mind, one of those goals that DC scored, that NYCFC conceded, was just an absolute golazo. So far, it's definitely been a pretty good start for this NYCFC team, and I think their fans are going to be happy with the way that this team has started their season. Now, moving on to FC Cincinnati. Well, for Cincinnati, they're going to be right here, unfortunately. And you notice how I just put them above the line where I put like a big exit, where I talk about I'm not going to put any team here because, it's going to be a pretty big overreaction if I put teams here where they should be in panic mode. But I'm pretty sure there's a lot of Cincinnati fans are in that mode right now. I mean, it's been an absolute disastrous start for this team that was supposed to be better this season with the amounts that they spent, especially on the attacking end. And really, besides the first 12 minutes when they went up 2-0 against FC Cincinnati, and it seems like both of the big money signings that they made this offseason were on the score sheet and on the assist chart, and maybe things were going to different. Yeah, after that, it feels like that's been a long time ago, and all that hope that FC Cincinnati has after going up 2-0 against Nashville, that quickly dwindled in that game against Nashville, where they gave up 2 goals, and then, of course, gave up 5 set-piece goals against NYCFC, and then in that Orlando game, it also didn't look like they were anything better. And what's even more alarming about this team, besides the fact that the defense is once again hot garbage, it's also the fact that the attack has once again struggled. And again, the amount of money that they spent this offseason to fix that attack. And the fact that they not only have not scored a goal in the last 2 games, but have even failed to register a single shot on goal in the last 2 games, that is definitely very alarming. And, I can see why a lot of Cincinnati fans are definitely panicking, and you can also see a lot of Cincinnati fans are clearly frustrated about their team. Like, a lot of their fans have been sending wooden spoon to their front office in terms of protesting of this poor start that they have. And as I said before, I really feel bad for their fans, because they don't deserve how things have gone in these last couple of seasons. And my only hope is that things eventually will turn around for this team, and that they're not going to look like a team that, at least in the first 3 games of the season, look like they're on their way to winning their 3rd straight wooden spoon to start their life in MLS. But now, moving on to the Portland Timbers. And for the Timbers, I'm actually going to say they're going to be right here. Now, I know the Timbers have only won 1 out of their first 3 games, and they only got 3 points so far into their new season. But you got to keep in mind, they're also another team that's been dealing with injuries and also dealing with CCL commitment. And at least in CCL, they have definitely have a lot of things to cheer about. So that's kind of the reason why I think they're going to be pretty happy. Not really because of their great start, but the fact that they are still able to do well in CCL, despite the fact missing some of those key players on the attack, like Abogasi and Blanco, and also able to pick up 3 points in their first 3 games. Where when I look at the first 3 games of the season, it looks like they were just gonna punt their first 3 games away and just solely focus on CCL. The fact that they're still able to get a win out of these first 3 games, I think that's definitely something that I think Timbers fans will be happy, considering the fact that they were pretty much just not really focusing on MLS, and they're happy to just kind of give up those points in the first 3 games. But yeah, once CCL of course is finished, and that if this team can of course get things going, then I think they're going to be staying into this tier. But if things does start to look dire again for this Timber side, then yeah, there maybe is going to be some concern, the fact that they're off to a slow start. But now moving on to their Cascadia rival, the Seattle Sounders. And for the Sounders, yeah, they're right next to where New England is currently is. And you notice I have both of these teams that have been right near the top of this rankings of the Emotional Index, because both of these teams are leading their conference right now in this early part of the season. And for the Sounders, it not only the fact that this has been a dream start for them to the start of the season, but this is also an unexpected dream start for this season. Like, they have really proved a lot of doubt wrong in terms of the fact that a lot of people thought that this was going to be a down year for the Sounders, with some of the moves that they made this offseason, giving away a couple of their important pieces in their core, and also dealing with some key injury in terms of the attacking core, and not having Nico Ladero for the first couple of games until that substitute appearance against the Galaxy for the last 30 minutes. This team still somehow find its way to be at the top of the Western Conference, and I think that's kind of bad news for all the team in the West right now, and in some way could be also bad news for every single team in MLS, because the Sounders are kind of like that, the evil empire of MLS. And also happy Star Wars Day, because of the fact that today is May 4th. But yeah, they're kind of like the evil empire of MLS right now, and a team that you kind of don't want to see them once again be one of those top team in MLS, and potentially is going to reach another MLS Cup. But with the way that they've looked so far for this season, and the fact that I'm assuming the Sounders are going to continue to add to their roster, yeah, this team could once again finish very well to the season. And that, again, they've been proving a lot of doubters wrong with the fact that this was supposed to be a transitional year for this team, and yet they still somehow find their way at the top of the Western Conference in their first 3 games of the season. But now moving on to the New York Red Bulls. So for the Red Bulls, I'm going to say they're going to be right here. And, for the Red Bulls, it could have been right here if they did not win that game against the Fire, but because they did win that game at home against the Chicago Fire, I decided to promote them a tier up in the emotional index where, yeah, it hasn't been the best start for this Red Bull side, but at least they avoid the same fate that Minnesota had in the start of the season, going 0 for 3 to start the year. And in that game against the Fire, they definitely show some promising thing, and that Garrett Struber finally able to get that monkey off the back, where he also was 0 for 3 coming into this season coaching this Red Bulls team, but finally got his first win. And I know some will say that maybe that was because they were playing against a Fire team that wasn't really a good team in MLS, but that was also a victory that they of course needed, because we also talk about how in the beginning of the season it's always important to get that first win off your back, knowing the fact that now you can potentially build on that for this upcoming weeks. And we'll see whether or not if the Red Bulls are going to continue to improve after again, the start of the season it hasn't really been that promising, although I would say that it's kind of expected with the way that they are going through a bit of a transitional period. But now moving on to the Colorado Rapids, and like what I explained with the Red Bulls, they're kind of also in the same boat where, have they lost that game against the Vancouver Whitecaps, they would have been right here with the way that this start of the season has not been anything that they hope for, and especially with the way that they locked in a lot of their players, and it seems like they have their main core in terms of potentially making a run in the playoffs. The way that a lot of these main core players like Diego Rubio, Jonathan Lewis, Jonas Namney, and all these players that haven't really got off to a good start, at least in the first couple of games to this season, is definitely alarming. But as I said, they did get that crucial win against the Vancouver Whitecaps, and let's see whether or not if they can build on that win and maybe go on a bit of a run to overcome their relatively slow start that they had to the start of this season. But now moving on to FC Dallas, and for Dallas again, this is now 3 teams in a row where I'm pretty much using the same explanation where I said about the Red Bulls, where things could have been even worse for this team, and that this team could have been right here if they lost to the Portland Timbers, but thankfully they were able to win that game against pretty much a Portland Timbers 2 side, or as I would say in that review, they were playing a T2 side, and they were rightfully so able to win 4-1 in that game. Now I will say this, unlike what I said with the Red Bulls, well, in some way I kind of said the same thing with the Red Bulls and Colorado, where they of course get a win against easy opponent. Is this just a case where they of course got a win against an easy opponent, or the fact that maybe this team of course can get things going? And especially it seems like they were kind of the more impressive side in terms of finally getting their first win of the season compared to the Red Bulls versus Colorado. Maybe there's a chance where Dallas could actually get things going, although when I maybe look at for their upcoming schedule, I think they also have a couple of road games coming up this season. I know the next game they're going to be playing against Minnesota at home, but I'm assuming they're going to have some road games coming up, and knowing the fact that this team does not do well on the road, yeah, that hope that maybe they can get things going might actually not come true, with the way that they are one of those teams that always tends to struggle on the road. But now moving on to LAFC. For LAFC, I'm going to say they're right on the border between it's been a dream start and they're kind of pretty happy with the great start that they had this season. I mean, I know LAFC right now, when you look at the standing, it's not really where they kind of want to be, but you got to also considering the fact that they also are dealing with some injuries, and especially dealing with injury to their biggest start on this team in Carlos Vela, and also Diego Rossi, who did play in that Houston game, but you can clearly see he doesn't seem like he was 100% healthy in that one. It's no surprise that LAFC hasn't really got off to a start that you hope that they were, if they were going to challenge for one of those top spot in the Western Conference. But there's no doubt that once they do get those 2 player back, this team should get things going. And again, they haven't lost a game so far for this season too, so I don't think it's not necessarily a bad start for them. And also when you look at the teams that they've been facing so far, I mean, some of these teams that they've been faced so far are not easy teams that they can get points. Against Austin FC, I talk about how Austin has looked very impressive to the start of the season, and then also getting a 1-1 draw against Seattle, despite the fact that they were very depleted heading into that game against the Sounders, and then also getting a 1-1 draw against the Dynamo, where anytime when you go to Houston, it's always tough to try to get something out of that, because that's one of the toughest places to, of course, go on the road and able to pick up a win out of that game. So yeah, for LAFC, I think they'll be pretty happy with this great start, although they're also hoping that some of their most important player can be back into this team, and that they can fulfill what they should be by the end of the season, which is finished as well the top team in the Western Conference. But now moving on to their intercity rival, the LA Galaxy. And for the Galaxy, I'll say they're right around here. Now, they could have been right here if they would have beat the Seattle Sounders. And if they would have beat the Sounders, then I think there's definitely signs that maybe this Galaxy team might be back to the level that they used to be in the early 2010s. And maybe, Greg Vanney, I talk about how I know that he's going to do well with this Galaxy team, but I didn't think he was going to instantly make an impact to this Galaxy team, and it seems like that, of course, was the case if they would have won against the Sounders. Well, unfortunately, they didn't win against the Seattle Sounders, and you can clearly see in that game there's still some issue with this team, and I know I always hate to bring this up, but their defense is still kind of hot garbage, and it's something that is going to probably hold them back this season if they want to have their chances to make the playoffs. But at least for the start of the season, they of course are able to get two wins to start the season and get 6 points. And anytime when you are able to get 6 points out of 9 to start the first free game of the season, I can't really put those teams anywhere lower than this category, because at the end of the day, you're off to a great start when you're able to get that amount of points, and also be one of the few teams that have got 6 points so far in their first free game of the season. But now moving on to Minnesota. Yeah, for Minnesota, they're right next to where FC Cincinnati is currently are, because like with some of the fan base in Cincinnati that is kind of in full on panic mode, that's the same case in some of the section of the Loons fan base, where I can understand why there's some Loons fans that is in a full on panic mode right now. But as I said before, I'm not really at that point where I'm going to be fully panic about this team, where they're the only team in the league so far to start 0-3 and haven't got a single points right now. But that being said, the longer this of course continue, the more I do have some concern. And this is even despite the fact that I know we're going to have some attacking reinforcement, and we're going to have a couple of players that is currently on the injury reserve list that we clearly missed, that is going to be back into this lineup, and that this team could definitely get better. But the question is, can they of course get better? Can they actually finally stop this early season collapse that they have shown so far? And I think the way to fix their early season collapse is that they got to score goals. I mean, as much as I know we'll talk about how bad the defense have been to start the season, and it seems like this defense that the Loons have had in the first 3 games looks something similar to what we saw in the first 2 seasons with this team in MLS. But my biggest concern right now is the attack, and the way that we spend so much money to try to add to this attack and even strengthen this attack. The fact that they have been absolutely toothless and been invisible for the first 3 games, that is the real concern I have with this team. And again, I know we're going to get some attacking reinforcement. We are going to get who knew potentially be with this team in a couple of weeks. And we have also been linked with Franco Freppin for a couple of weeks now, and I'm assuming that deal is going to eventually come, and he's going to be, I believe, a good replacement for Molino that we lost this offseason. But so far it's not been a great start for this team, and a lot of that has to do with the fact that the attack just have not been at a way where I expected that they are right now. But in general, every part of this team is definitely underachieving so far, and I just can't imagine how this struggle that they had is going to continue to go through for the rest of the season, because there's just no way in the world, with the talent that they that this Minnesota team currently has, that this team should not be able to find themselves get out of this hole that they dug themselves in the beginning of the season. But now moving on to Orlando City. And for Orlando, I would say they're going to be right here, where I think Orlando fans are happy with the start of the season. I mean, they still have got a defeat so far to their season, and they finally got that monkey off their back in terms of getting their first win of the season against FC Cincinnati. And this is despite the fact that they're still dealing with some injuries, and also unfortunately they did had one of their big signings this offseason in Alexandre Pato go down with an injury. But as I said before, with this Orlando team, as long as they can continue to stay respectable in the Eastern Conference and in the hunt for those top playoff spot, and once they potentially are going to get Darren DK back after that loan again with him in Barnsley is going to be over, I think they're going to be just fine. But also they're going to be just fine with the way that, as I said, there are going to be some key pieces on this team that is going to be coming back from injury, and I expect this team should potentially be one of the top team coming out of the Eastern Conference by the end of this season. But now moving on to RSL, and for RSL, yeah, it's been an absolute dream start for this team, and right now this is the only team in MLS to have yet to lose or draw a game, as they have won their first two game of the season. And really, I don't think anybody expected that this was going to be the case. Like, if you would have told me RSL would be the only team right now to not suffer a draw and defeat after 3 weeks into the season, I would think you're absolutely crazy. But the way that this team has had, and just some unsung hero from this team, and guys that you probably didn't think that they would make some big impact to this RSL attack, like guys like Anderson Julio and Rubin, yeah, they have really took in storm, and that this is kind of another example of what happened when a team that you might think at first they might not be a good team, and they might be a team that actually finished at the bottom of the Western Conference, but all of a sudden some of these unknown names turns out to prove everybody wrong, that they can actually be very decent in MLS. Yeah, things are looking brightly for this RSL team. Although I will also say that it is still a very small sample size of how good some of these unknown quality player has got off to a good start, and it'll be very interesting to see whether or not if they can continue for the next couple of games. But now moving on to Toronto FC, and for TFC, I think they're going to be right here where it's kind of a meh start to the season, where things could be better, but things could be worse. And, like what I said with DC, they're another team that is dealing with tons of injuries right now. And the fact that, I know in this start of the season, I think they haven't got a win so far this season. Well, actually, they only played 2 games this season, and they, of course, lost their opening game against Vancouver, and then got a draw against, or they lost their opening game against Montreal, and then they got a draw against the Vancouver Whitecaps. There are some positive things that you could say about this TFC team, where they're trying their best to stay competitive in MLS, despite the fact of not having probably their most important player in Alejandro Pozuelo, and the fact that they were able to take down Club Leon despite the fact that they were playing a TFC2 side is alone a feat that I didn't think that was going to happen. So to those kind of part, I think you could say that it's been a pretty okay start for this TFC team, but I'm pretty sure there's also some Toronto fans who are kind of frustrated the fact that the lack of depth is clearly showing why this team maybe might not be one of those top teams if they're not going to have their most important player in the starting 11. And this is also kind of something that I said in the beginning of the season, where maybe TFC might not actually be a decent team if they don't have their most important player in the starting 11 every single game, and that if they do have to go through an injury crisis as they are dealing with right now, it's no surprise that they are really struggling right now, because they just don't have a lot of depth in terms of their team. But now moving on to the Chicago Fire, and for the Fire, I'm going to say they're going to be just a little bit above where FC Cincinnati and Minnesota has right now. So besides that promising start that they had, and in some ways Chicago is kind of almost in that same territory as what FC Cincinnati has, where that promising start where they went up 2-0 in the first game of the season looked like things were going to change, and then after that it's been pretty much darkness after that. And for the Fire, they're also another team that in the opening week can concede 2 goals, and actually concede 2 goals in the first half to end up drawing 2-2 against New England. But ever since they have not really looked like a team that should take the next step heading into this season, which is be a team that competes for playoffs. And you can definitely start to see that there's some frustration in terms of the Fire fan base, where this was supposed to be the year. Last season I think they can forgive the team because since they made so much move that off season, and even some would say that they're kind of like an expansion team with so many things that they have changed to their team, both in their squad and also in the front office and even their identity. But this season, there probably should be no excuse. The fact that this team is not competitive because the pieces are there that they made last off season to basically get this team to the next level, and the fact that they're not showing that, at least in these first couple of games, is definitely a bit of a worrying sign. But now moving on to the Columbus Crew, and for the Crew, this is a bit tough one. I'm gonna say I think they're pretty happy so far with the start that they had, and yes, I know this Crew team have yet to score goals this season, and have yet to get a win this season. But at the same time, they also haven't conceded so far this season too. And I think for the Crew, they're another team that unfortunately are dealing with some injury, mostly that is part of the incredible depth that they have made throughout the off season. But this is also another team, just like what I said with Portland, where they might not got off to a great start in MLS play, but that's because they're basically solely focusing on CCL right now. And if they of course can't overcome currently they're tied with Rayados heading into the second leg, but if they can be one of those teams that overcome what MLS team always tends to struggle when they go down to Mexico to play a second leg in the CONCACAF Champions League, then I think Crew fan will be happy with the ways that they have started this season, even though in the league they haven't really started very well to this season. But that being said, they also have been playing some tough team in the first two games. I mean, they play against the defending Supporters Shield champ, that is the Union, in the first game, and then they were also playing an uprising Montreal team in the second game on the road. But now moving on to the Houston Dynamo, and for the Dynamo, I think they're going to be right here, where I think Dynamo fans should be happy with the way that they start this season. I mean, I know, yes, they did get a loss against the Timbers on the road, but this has been a pretty good start for the Dynamo, and they're doing what they need to do if they maybe have a slight chance of making the playoffs, which is heavily rely on their home form. And so far they only drop points against LAFC, but it's always going to be tough to trying to get win against LAFC at home. But they also got that important home victory this first part of the season against the San Jose Earthquakes. Now, the interesting thing I will say about this Dynamo team is that it's going to be interesting to see whether or not if this team, in terms of quality wise, will be enough to potentially keep this good form that they had. Because when you look at how they played to start the season, there's definitely some surprises where some of these players on this team have definitely done well. Especially some of the off-season signings that they made this season. I think Tim Parker has been doing well in terms of stabilizing that midfield, and Joe Corona also have been doing well in terms of stabilizing the midfield. And there's also some surprises on the attack too. Some guys that you probably have not heard in the beginning of the season, but you kind of now got to know how he could be a decent player. That is Tyler Pasher on this Houston Dynamo team. But we'll see whether or not if they can, of course, continue, because there's always going to be that doubt where I just don't think this team has enough quality where they can potentially, on the long run, continue the success that they have so far early in this season. And especially, there's always that question whether or not if they can, of course, get points on the road. And so far, at least in the one road game that they have shown, they probably are still struggling in terms of that department. But now moving on to Montreal, or specifically CF Montreal, as a lot of people would say. I think Montreal fans are going to be happy also with the start of the season. Again, this is another team where a lot of people have a lot of question with whether or not if they have enough quality in this team to potentially make a good run, especially with Wilfred Nancy stepping in, being a first year head coach. Whether or not if that inexperience is probably not going to be enough for them to be a decent team. Well, so far, at least early part of the season, they have shown that they could actually be a decent team, and I really love how some of the signings that they made so far this season has really kind of stepped up early part of this season. Well, actually, some of the signings that they made this off season has really stepped up for these first couple of games. Now the question is whether or not if that, of course, can continue. And I've also said before where the thing that I do concern with Montreal is that when you look at the chances that they've been creating and the amount of times that they try to, of course, score goals on the attacking end, they have performed very high in terms of that, and they've been very lethal in terms of that department. But at the same time, if there's going to be a case where I've seen before where this team might not be lethal in front of goal, and maybe the goal well started to dry up, whether or not if this team can continue the success that they have in this early season, and that they might start to fall a little bit in the standing, we shall see. But as of now, it's been a great start for this Montreal side, getting 5 points in their first 3 games. But now moving on to the Philadelphia Union. And for the Union, I'm going to say they're going to be right here. And again, I know the Union has not got off to a great start in their MLS season. And in fact, you could even say that this has kind of been a poor start for the Union, and an unexpected poor start with the way that in the 2 home games that they have played so far this season, they lost both of those. And this is a team that did not lose a single home game in the regular season last year, and they already have they already have 2 losses in their first 2 home games of the season. That could maybe be a little bit of a concerning factor. But that being said, when you also look at how they're another team that clearly is focusing on CCL heavily, and that they've been doing very well in CCL, and could maybe be the only MLS team that make it to the semifinal of CCL heading into this season. I think Union fans are going to be happy, even though they have not done very well in terms of their home form. And as I will say about the CCL team, with them focusing solely on the CONCACAF Champions League, once they don't have to deal with that, with the way that, I know the semifinal of CCL is not going to be until August. So there's going to be a leeway now, and these teams can maybe now start to focus on MLS play a little bit and recover some of the points that they've lost during this early part of the season, because they were heavily focusing on the CONCACAF Champions League and want to go through deeper into that competition. But now moving on to the Quakes. So for the San Jose Earthquakes, I'm going to say they're also right here, where I think it's been a good start for the Quakes. It need to be a great start for the Quakes, because I mentioned before how it is very important that the Quakes needs to get off to a good start with the way that the schedule is going to start to get tougher for this team. And I think it starts for this upcoming weekend game where they are going to go on the road against RSL, which is a game where in the beginning of the season I thought it might be a place where we could actually maybe get some points, but knowing how good RSL has played so far in the first 2 games, I'm not quite sure that could be a possibility. And then when you also look at the next 2 games after they go on the road against RSL, they get to play the 2 Cascadia team, and they have to play Seattle in the middle of the week, and then play against the Timbers during the weekend. Those are going to be very tough matches, and that, it's great that the Quakes, of course, are going off to a great start to the season, and they need to be and kind of maybe give them a little bit of a cushion in case if they don't do well in those games when they face against tough opponent. But I think maybe the only thing I will say about this Quakes team, besides the fact that when you look at this team, and especially the revelation of K Cal has really been the story of this team. It would be interesting to see whether or not if he can, of course, continue that. And also, let's see how the defense is going to fare up when they do play against a very good attacking team. Because right now, I think when you look at the Quakes and the team that they've been playing, those are the team that doesn't really have a very good attack. When they do face against the Timbers and the Seattle Sounders, where those are 2 of the most impressive attacking team, or even facing against RSL, where they seems like they're red hot right now going for it in front of goal, we'll see whether or not if this defense can basically hold up heading into those games. But now moving on into the last team that I'm going to put here on the emotional index, which is the Vancouver Whitecaps. And For the Whitecaps, I'll say they're going to be right here. And, the Whitecaps could have been right here, where they're going to be pretty happy with a great start if they would have got something out of that game against Colorado. But I think that game against the Rapids is a huge reality check that they're definitely not there in terms of making the next jump to potentially be a playoff team. But that being said, I think it's been an okay start to this season for the Whitecaps, where they're able to get 4 points in their first 3 games. But that game against Colorado, that game is going to hurt for them, because not only the fact that that was technically a home game for them, and you always want to get 3 points at home, but they were playing against a Rapids team that was struggling coming into that game, and the fact that they weren't able to score a goal during that game, and they kind of looked like a team that we saw last season, where they were kind of vulnerable at times in the defensive end, and also struggled to create some chances besides on the set piece. Yeah, I think that's something that Whitecaps fans might be a little bit concerned going forward. But still, it's been a good start for this team, getting 4 points in 3 games, but we'll see whether or not if that is going to continue. But there you have it. That is pretty much it in terms of me putting all 27 in the emotional index. Let me know in the comments below, what do you think of this video? And as always, did I put some of these teams in the emotional index a little bit too high? Or if you're a fan of one of these teams, let me know in the comments below, how do you feel right now? Do you feel your team has got off to a dream start to the season? Are you pretty happy with the great start that you had? Are you kind of feeling, it could be better, and it could be worse with the way that we start the first 3 games of the season? Or unfortunately, you're at this point where, yeah, things are looking so dire that if they keep losing, they potentially will move into this category that I currently don't have, which is panic mode, and that things are definitely look like it's going to be a long season for us. But let me know in the comments below. But until then, hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you do, make sure you guys leave a like, smash the subscribe button, and yeah, I of course will see you guys next time.